All right, so we're going to get started here in just a minute. We have Justin Obney from Paystar here with us today. We've got a great crowd here in the Invo Club, and I see we have quite a few on our Google Meet as well. So I want to welcome everyone to our Distinguished Lecturer Series. This is our second offering this semester, and we'll have one more after this. I've got some of my Gen Cyber teachers joining us from various high schools around the state. I'm really excited that they're able to join us and learn from all of the wonderful things that we've got going on here at Southeastern. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Justin, because I know he's the one y'all are waiting for. You don't want to hear me. Justin is the CTO of Paystar, which is a payment processing startup, and they're based out of Baton Rouge. He's responsible for all of the engineering needs of the business, which serves hundreds of clients over 33 states. Justin has 14 years of professional experience in environments including consulting shops, enterprise IT departments, and SaaS product companies. He's also the CTO and co-founder of Elevator 3. I know we've all heard of them, where his primary focus is unblocking development challenges and improving the company's infrastructure. And so without further ado, here to present his lecture on, I love the name of it. This should have been a TikTok.
Something like that.
Love it. Without further ado, here's Justin.
Thank y'all. I think there's a lot of firsts. I think this is the first time I've ever got mic'd up. So definitely taking advantage of that. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Is this thing working? Hi, everybody. So yeah, I'm Justin. I'm a developer, kind of. And so when Doc asked me to do this talk, which was my first ever text message with him, he was like, hey, there's this distinguished lecture series. We'd love for you to come. We know how Elevator 3 is involved in things at Southeastern. I was like, great. What should I talk about? And who's the audience? And he was like, well, the audience is students and faculty, and you can talk about whatever you want. And I was like, that really doesn't help me at all. So I kind of fell back into my natural creative process, which was avoid most responsibility and just focus on things that are interesting to me. It's a gamble, so you use that sparingly. And I really didn't know if there was anything that I could come back and really say, do X or do Y, because it's so hard to say, because your world's going to change every day, every week, every year. And so I was like, what can I offer? So I look at these things as, what value am I going to bring to it? And I was like, well, I think I can probably just give some perspective of given the context of my experience, here's kind of what my day-to-day is like. And, how different is that from when it was getting started? Can't believe it was 14 years ago, but that was it. And so I'll kind of give you a little bit of backstory. I'll be brief with it, but I started Southeastern at 17 years old, dropped out of Southeastern at 18 years old, worked offshore, had no clue what I wanted to do, went back to school for networking, and I stepped into a programming class at a technical college. And I was like, this is interesting. So that was how I got into development. Got a job at a construction company, worked there for about 4 years doing mostly front-end development. Heard about this company in Baton Rouge called Invoke. And so, being resourceful, I was like, most companies are first initial, last name at theircompany.com. And so I fired off an email to some assumed name at Invoke, had a job a couple days later, and then I was in the consulting world. The consulting world was very interesting because in the enterprise world, it is a little bit slower. It's a lot safer pay-wise. It's a great place to kind of get your footing and do things. And then there, you don't really have this pressure that much in a lot of cases. Your mileage may vary. And so, but then getting in this consulting world, which, hey, we have a consulting company, so let us know if you're interested in that. But getting into that, you really got this exposure to a wide variety of things. So we would work on a lot of projects. And so that really kind of helped expand our vision of what was out there. One of the things that so throughout my life, I always had this thought, what did I miss by not going to college? I remember in my first job, we were building this like search algorithm, and I was like trying to figure this out, and I'm like describing it, like what I'm trying to get it to do. And the guy sitting next to me is like an EE major, or that's what he had his degree. And he's like, oh, you want this? And just whipped out this formula. I had no clue what it was. It was like, that's exactly what I want. And so like one of the things I think I missed out was just exposure to things to look into. So like that made it a little bit harder to like solve a problem, because then you had to figure out where to start looking to solve the problem. And so that was an interesting part. Getting consulting did the same thing for business. It exposed the variety of topics that I would kind of dive into on a project and learn. And so when all that kind of started coming together, I realized that exposure and that proximity to like being around things so that you can kind of go further was really a key thing to continue to focus on. So spent some years at Invoke doing front-end development, then started giving some talks in some of the community, went out there, and then someone from Turner, another enterprise, kind of approached me and was like, hey, we're looking for someone that does X, Y, and Z, my exact skill set, and this is what you can get. And so I was like, okay. So I went there and started building out some teams there, working on some projects, taking more of a leadership role. That was about 3 or 4 years. And then I kind of recall Brandon, I had got him to come work with me, Brandon Cornett, and he jumped to Paystar. And so he had been trying to get me to go to Paystar, and I had some things happen that kind of gave me a good bit of confidence that like I would be employable. And so jumped out there, started Paystar. This time, Brandon and I were like working at night, building Elevator 3. And at some point, it started to get some momentum. And we're like, okay, we should hire people, split it off. Fast forward, and I think we have like 18 or 20 employees at Elevator 3. Brandon quickly had to go manage that full time. And then I stepped into my current role at Paystar. At Paystar, we were building a new platform, or a new version of their platform, and we were trying to figure out what that meant. Brandon and I spent a good bit of time planning that in the beginning, and then it was like 3 years of heads down, like ship code, like startup mode, and it's been a blast. It has. And that kind of brings us to where we are right now. And like, I'm at a really interesting spot right now, because I've started to get some people under me that I can kind of give work to. And like, I'm stepping into like whatever the next thing is. And so I felt like one of the best things I could maybe provide was just insight on what that means now. And so, because like the first bit of my career was so tied to the in the weeds detail of what I was doing. Like everything was like development, software, like what framework, what library, am I worried about design patterns and all those things? And now it's transitioned a lot to what is the business value of this? Are we making an investment in technology that's going to pay off? Or should we be using a boring technology that's tried and true? It's like, oh, do we want to use a boring technology that's going to bring in $1 million? Or do we want to take a guess on a new experimental thing that might yield value? And like everything's a sliding scale. Sometimes we do one, sometimes we do the other. But it's really not something I saw getting in. I always thought I just wanted to do this thing. And I thought I would kind of open it up with like, given that context, is there any kind of questions maybe I can answer for y'all that I'll just be raw and open with like, that's kind of my MO. Like, has anybody got any questions on what that's like? Or, because y'all are about to make some of these decisions. They're not permanent. Most of them don't matter that much. we were talking about how much we'd go into that earlier in the office. But like,
I have a question.
yes.
How do you balance between the technical side of it and the business side of it? Because I know you're involved in both. So how do you balance between these two things?
So I don't think you balance between them at all. I don't think you're going to get great at anything by balancing them. You have to kind of come to terms with what you're going to allow to become unbalanced so that you can focus where you're trying to get. And that's not meaning that like you're going to justify the outcome, the means from the outcome, you know. It's like, make a very real judgment with yourself. Like, one of the things I really love to learn, like, I can't believe they pay me to do this. I can't believe I have a company. I can't believe I'm a CTO. Can't believe I'm in a distinguished lectured series and I dropped out of a company that, or the you know, the place that's doing it. Like, can't believe any of that. And so, but I kind of take that as like, man, I better take advantage of that and like get everything out of it. So I really love this stuff. I read it, I learn it, I always do this. But that doesn't mean I'm like not having a good work-life balance. Like, I kind of knock off around 4, do all the family stuff. I'm lucky, like most of my family goes to sleep around 8 o'clock. And it's like, cool, I'll work till midnight. You know, not because I feel like I have to, but because like I really like this. And so that was a thing I wasn't going to sacrifice, was my kind of family time. But that didn't mean I wasn't going to go after it. It meant just I was going to rearrange it. Like, I wasn't just going to sit there and I know that everyone has different constraints. Like, I know that everyone's thing is different and all that, not saying that everything's equal or any of that stuff. But I think like that is the key, is like finding that kind of sliding scale and just leaning towards that. And then you kind of unbalance, you know, you come in and unbalance. It's like, if I'm shooting for this outcome in the tech, that's going to be hard. I have to like push some of that business stuff off, hopefully, to some people that can pick up the slack, still be available to be brought in if I need to. But like, for the most part, I have to be like, not important, not important, not important until something truly is important. And that means some things don't get the attention maybe they should have, like preparing for a talk. But that doesn't mean I wasn't gonna like come here and try to like provide some value and like try to give you a real perspective on, you know, I don't know if I've been in your shoes, but I've probably failed at a lot of the things you might fail at. So there's at least that, if that makes any sense. Oh, you become okay with it. Like. So the question was, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? And like, you become okay with it. As cheesy as it sounds, I don't think I was ready for any of the next level. Like, I wasn't ready to come in and run all the tech at a payment company moving, you know, $100 million a year. I put a lot of things in place that made like terrible failures very hard to happen. You know, like I did that. But then once I got like that in place, it was like, cool, step into it. I remember Brandon and I, when we were gonna hire our first employee at Elevator 3, it was like, we're about to tell someone to leave their job at a company that makes a couple $2 billion, predicated on the fact that we can probably pay them. And that was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. I remember like when we started getting calls from people that were like buying houses and they were like checking their income and stuff like that. It's like, people are buying houses based on our ability to pay them. Also terrifying. But like, I don't know, you still got to do it. I mean, or you don't. Like, that's the thing. Like, you don't have to do it. Like, if you have a job and you go to work 40 hours a week and you make money and you barbecue every day and you find happiness, you're winning. Like, game over. Like, you don't need to strive for anything other than that if it makes you happy. But if you have something like that you want to do, go for it. Like,
I'm curious. So you said you're kind of like every person can kind of keep learning. So where do you see yourself continuing to learn over the next 5 years?
so the question was, where do I see myself continuing to learn over the next 5 years? Ooh, that's hard because I'm kind of I'm in uncharted territory again for me. Like, if you would have asked me over the past 10 years how I was going to keep up with tech, got that answer totally. I can probably keep up with tech, what's changing, what I need to keep my thumb on, what I don't. But now that I'm kind of stepping in to this other side, like the thing I loved about the tech was like it had constraints. And so like if you could figure out the constraints, you could like make it do something. But getting out of the tech, you start dealing with people and they have emotions and they have good days and bad days and flat tires, and you bought this person and it's a lot harder. So like I don't have a good answer for that because I'm trying to figure that out. Like I'm absolutely trying to figure that out right now because I'm trying to figure out what the next iteration of kind of my role is. It's still going to be in the tech for a while at Paystar, but it might be kind of how to become like I don't even know. Nope, that's the answer. No clue. Yep.
What is your advice to somebody who's starting out
Project management? That's awesome question because we just brought in a VP of project management to sort out long time coming. So at Paystar, again, we were a startup, we ran pretty lean. The product drives all money. And like, so it's like the ultimate, if you won or lost, because if people use the product, you keep getting paid. And so we were doing a lot of that stuff, and then we started to get a lot bigger, and we are starting to scale, and like a lot of those cracks started to show themselves. And we had worked with someone a long time ago at Invoke, and she had since went to run project management at a large university, and we kept trying to get her for a while because we knew we needed it. And she came in, and it's really been a big thing. It's made a massive impact where we are. And so project management right now is kind of top of mind. And what I'm balancing right now is people that have like project management mentalities from very large organizations where you can do a ton of there is a massive level of bureaucracy and things you need at larger organizations, and that would drown us and it would take away everything we need because of our nimbleness that we need right now. And so what I'm trying to do with project management right now is I'm trying to keep letting her put her expertise in place and just try to rein back what I think is just too much for our organization. And so I would probably say that becoming more aware of how much to scope the project management to the organization's needs would be the best way to probably be effective. And I'm a firm believer that I don't think developers are better than anybody. Your person leading development, your person leading design, your person leading project management, they all play crucial roles. And it's interesting when you have a consulting company, because you charge hourly and different people have different rates and mentalities begin to like become a thing. It's not the case, but it's a reality. And sometimes that's the way the world works. But finding that sweet spot of putting the processes in place to save you without like compromising like too much speed and agility is really where I think it's super valuable. And she's crushing it. Like we're taking so much advantage of that right now. And so
Talking about connecting human skills, tech, all that together. You're hiring people. How important is interpersonal communication skills?
So a former graduate, Jay Tulk, runs all of that for me because he's way better at that than me. And so Jay really cares about kind of getting a good picture of the person. And I gotta imagine that's like the key. Again, it's hard to do that in a hiring context because you have a limited amount of time. Is the person there on their lunch break and trying to be like, not broadcasting it? And so it's really hard to do that.
From a culture perspective, maybe build a culture.
I don't know that I have any concrete opinions on that either, because so many times I've been wrong about that. I mean, I think if I would say anything to that, it would be figuring out what the organization's kind of vibe and culture and feel is, and putting that out there, but not necessarily expecting like all your employees to like match that perfectly or anything like that is really where I would land, because you definitely want those different experiences, but I still see a lot of value in the organization being very purposeful in its position on a lot of things, so you don't end up with like these miscommunication, these assumptions of I assume the company thought this or X or Y. Then it's everyone's kind of personal choice. Again, are they working on something that's super interesting to them, and one thing that they don't agree with is a minor thing to them? Cool, whatever. I just won't deal with that thing. But you're also in this new place that I'm figuring out right now. And I still live there. I'm probably still 60% in the tech. And so like I'm right in this transition. So a lot of these, another great way to get better at something is to come stand in front of a lot of people that think you know about it and let their questions like lead where you're going to start thinking about things. And here it is. So yeah. What's up?
Where do you go to learn about tech?
Oh, where do I go to learn about the tech? So most of my different social media things are kind of segregated by things like that. Like Twitter is my tech social media. And so I follow a lot of people on Twitter. And so Twitter's algorithms got me pegged pretty good. It keeps me very up to date with like people posting things that are relevant to me. And outside of that, there's typically a bunch of really good newsletters. And I kind of built this pattern of like, I'll get a bunch of them, and like one day a week, I'll open them up. I'll click through all the links, give it like a 10-second scan of each one, and then like save it to something for like reading it later. It's like, I kind of use it more as like a catalog of like knowing what I can reach for if I want to. And inevitably, like a couple of those things will be more interesting to me, and those things I might read up a little bit in depth on. It's funny, like even though I don't really mess with, I'm becoming less interested in keeping up with the frameworks. But we had some guys the other day that were like, hey, we've got this bug that in development, it's rendering twice. And I was like, oh, you upgraded to React 18, didn't you? And they're like, yeah. I was like, yeah, that's actually a thing because they're trying to tell you that blah, blah, blah tech needs to have different assumptions. They made this feel weird. And it's like, only reason I knew that was because it was in one of the emails that I scanned through and saw that, and he just happened to ask a question that was directly relevant to the one blurb. But nonetheless, it kind of works a little bit, you know? So, and then once you kind of, there's like benefits to being a generalist and specializing. Probably the first 10 years, I was like way more hardcore front-end developer and like interviewing at Facebook to work like on like at Facebook with React and stuff. And then Paystar, like I'd never really led the back-end development of a product. And surprise, surprise, Paystar is moving hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And I think I'm doing an okay job. We'll find out if, you know, the IRS comes knocking on our door one day. But once I started on Paystar and I just started changing that specialization, just kind of focusing it, like trying to be a generalist, you can only go so deep. It's another thing where it's probably good to know a little bit about some things. But then just like one thing I'm realizing every day is the world is continuously so much bigger than I ever thought it was. And so just knowing that it's so much bigger, it's like, well, there's probably a lot of room for specialization in a lot of places, and you can make a lot of success out of that. And so it's definitely a good place to aim while you're figuring it out. Like you can specialize in something while you're figuring out if you want to change that. So that's probably it, is those two. I don't know how much mobile world changes things, because looking at code on a phone isn't the best thing in the world. And so that, you know, obviously they've been around for a long time, but for a lot of my career, desktop stuff like that, digging into libraries, like figuring out how things work, like trying to figure out how it works in something that you use, like digging into it, trying to reverse engineer it is something I do a lot. Because a lot of companies have spent a lot of money making things really good. And so if I can learn from reverse engineering their stuff.
So to bring up that question, like you do things on a pretty big scale. How do you sort of gauge the risk on moving to
Have a backup plan. So we had a problem we got hit with at Paystar, and Jay wanted to try this kind of like new tech. And I was like, we could just also use a database. And, you know, it's boring. It's not as cool as what it was, but it would have solved our problem and how we would have done it. And Jay had a lot of, Jay Tulk is kind of my right-hand person at Paystar. He had a lot of kind of points to the new stuff. And kind of what I told him is that more than anything, I wanted to know that he evaluated going the old boring way and that he weighed it and chose the new way investment. Like outside of that, I kind of trust his judgment. And then that coupled with the fact that if 2 weeks in it would have failed horribly, I know we have a solution we could have swapped to that would have solved it. And so like we were given enough way to kind of experiment and try to get it. And he did. It worked great. It actually ended up opening the path for a lot of other functionality in our platform that we were able to do now. And it was a very good investment. And so sometimes we make that, sometimes we don't. And that's like another fun part of where we are as a company right now is we're like small enough to still kind of be shoot from the hip and like make those decisions and go for it. But we're kind of growing to a level where we're going to have some guardrails. Hence why I kind of brought in the project management person, is because like we definitely need some guardrails. It can't just be like developers in the Wild West. Because as a developer, I always want to choose the interesting thing. Like I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do this because this sounds like a fun problem. And what you find out later on is like, that's a fun problem. This one can bring in $500,000 in revenue. And the business is definitely going to choose the other one. And so if you can find a way to couple those fun problems with the business values, then you're going to win a lot more, because then you get to work on it and you get to make the case with the business value. And as far as like like I'm always like, hey, if you can make the case and back up your idea, and it's not like going to introduce like risk or liability to us, hey, like there's more of you than me. And so naturally there's a lot of places that we can just benefit from.
So you said you have a lot of experience, 15 years of trying and failing, learning and failing. How do you best learn to manage missteps, shortcomings?
Own it fast. Oh, so the question through failing a lot, like how do you manage those failures and setbacks? And like my strategy is own it fast, own it publicly. Like I will absolutely own when I fail all the time. Early on at Paystar, I made a bad programming choice and accidentally swamped one of our clients with 70,000 emails and like crashed their server. But we were like, hey, our bad. Product's still good, and all was forgiven, and they're one of our best clients. If we would have tried to like sneak or weasel out of it, it probably would have been worse, but we kind of owned it. We've had like not a lot, but we've had a couple interesting, fun things, and sometimes like those stakes do get higher. We recently got into a new line of business where we do a lot of printing and mailing, and it's like, cool, if you mess up there, it's permanent. Like you've already spent the ink, you can't undo. Like at least like with like money sounds permanent. It's not, don't mess up, but it's not like you can just void it. You can actually reverse it. Like you can do things that aren't permanent. Like once you burn a consumable resource like paper, it's like you pay for it. It's like if we mess up, it costs $6,000 if you mess up on printing something for a big client. And so it's like, you know, you learn to kind of put the things in place where, you know, the cost of failure is very high. We put tags on, like we put stuff in our CI to where if you change anything under like our payment processing directories, it like automatically adds like 2 reviewers that are like over all payment processing and merchant service stuff. So we don't have like things getting in that, like own it. But one of the things I value taking that step and learning. And so I think we've put a lot of things in place to stop junior people or kind of newer people from like having very like if a junior person can cause a catastrophic failure at your company, that's not the junior person's problem. Like it's not their fault at all. It's like that's a failure of leadership, 100%. And so every bad thing that happens in the tech at Paystar is my fault, ultimately. Hands down, no one gets the blame out of that. But we've put things in place, and because that, I am more upset if someone doesn't do something out of like fear of doing the wrong thing than them doing one that I tell them, no, throw this away, we're going to redo it. It's because like, I know I'm busy. I don't have a lot of time like to go talk with all the people, but that shouldn't stop them from like taking a step and making an advancement, especially when like you're explicitly told like, go forth and figure it out. And so hopefully you find places that like allow that to happen, you know? And again, I don't have an MBA, so all of these are just random thought. Like, I hope it's right. I don't know if it's right, but it's just me giving it a shot. All these people, yeah. What up?
So what is the process of like for all the new people? You start giving the clients using it. How does that work?
So this is like one of the, so the question was like, given the nature of what we do, we write software that moves monies for governments and municipalities. If you owe money to like the state, you're using our software. When we roll things out, like what are the process of that? And this is one place that we kind of did nerd out a lot and put a lot of stuff in place. And we have a pretty good process where we have like a pre-production, which is still our prod database thing, but we can roll whole new stuff. We can cycle it out to just segments of our users, and there's no downtime when we do any of this. And we have most things behind feature flags, so we can just like, we can say, this organization sees this new thing. And because of that, we've been able to kind of really move fast, even though we're in a high stakes area of like moving money. And it's probably a lot to kind of get into of like what's possible, but more, I guess the bigger part is that we wanted to keep the velocity we had when we didn't have a lot of clients that were working in a million different ways. And so we invested, that's one of the places we invested more heavily in the tech than just using an old boring way of like, take the site down for 10 minutes. Like, I don't know what I'd do if I like went to PayPal and was like, come back in 5 minutes. You'd be like, that's not how the web works these days. And so, but we've had some other interesting kind of things where one time we kind of rewrote the whole payment processing workflow, which is like a big deal to get wrong. And again, this is where like, we rolled it out little by little to people, and we had the old one and the new one in there. So everyone could, like, we had both. We thought we were good. We turned it on for the last client, and like 5 minutes later, they called us and they were like, hey, something's wrong. And this one client worked a little differently than other people. So we like hit a button and they were back on the new code instantly, and we were able to go fix it. And so like, that's like another example, like talking about like, you can't be necessarily afraid of failure to slow down that kind of progress and innovation, but you can absolutely put things in place that make the cost of failure lower or the recoverability of failure cheaper. And so like, that's really what we try to optimize for, is like moving fast, but thoughtfully in a responsible manner. It's not move fast and break, it's kind of move fast and break things, but not bad. So.
Said that systems in place that like restrict, like say a junior breaking something catastrophic. At what do you have a point where you say that this is too much of a restriction? Yes, do you restrict things as they come up, or like what is your process?
So the question is like, how do we decide what levels of restriction to put on who? We're not big enough to have super granular control or need for super granular control right now. So our current philosophy is kind of pick the most critical systems and kind of gate them, and you know, and then add like restricted access as needed. And some of our other mentality is also just make sure we can always tell everything that ever happened at any time ever. And so we invest super hard into logging, tracing, debugging, and things like that. So in the event that we do overgive something, again, recoverability, we make sure it's reversible, but like we can immediately find out what happened, figure out, do we need to restrict some access, or how do we recover, or how do we know what it is? And so like, that's just, again, like those places. But I think we don't necessarily dole out a lot of production access per se. So it's not like juniors can mess up anything in production. It's more so from a junior perspective that we kind of scope what they're working on to where like the implications of getting it wrong or the approval process is in place, that like it's not their fault if it's wrong. And so like that's how we kind of stop more junior people from necessarily having bad, bad failures. What up?
It's like in the business perspective, like where would you like to see like a Paystar
Oh, so where would I like to see Paystar and or Elevator 3 go? Well, they're two different things altogether. So it's like it's totally two different answers. Paystar definitely continue to grow and refine our target, our product niche, and like because we have a pretty good product targeted at an industry where it's easy to sell it, and so continuing to like really figure out how to grow that without like, you want to grow it but you want to keep it simple, and so you want to, or keep it purposeful rather. And so we have a lot of stuff at Paystar that like we have a ton of work ahead of us at Paystar, like, and that's really just expanding our product capabilities, our offerings, what tools are ancillary to our offerings that we can offer as support tools to the organizations using us. And so from that perspective, Paystar gets that focus. From an E3 perspective, E3 as a consulting company, just continuing to like refine what that market is, our presence locally, nationally, and things like that. Continuing to get really good developers and identify them through places and grow our kind of recruiting stuff there, because that's a big piece of Elevator 3 is kind of effectively finding developers, training them up, trying to keep them in our stack, and like kind of getting to mold them in that way. And I don't know, maybe E3 has some other product offshoots. It's like Paystar is a product company, but E3 has some other prospective products kind of we're thinking about doing. So can't really get into that right now. Hey, how's it going?
I have a question. So it seems like you do a lot of things. How do you keep balance and all that? You keep a family, you run like a really big business, and you also try to take care of yourself. How do you balance all that?
As best I can. Like how do I balance everything? Like as best I can. I think I do think I have a pretty good handle on what's important to me. And so I just try to run everything through that filter. And you got to be okay with like things that don't meet the criteria of important, of like stating that. But you can also do that in like very respectful, purposeful ways. You can say that doesn't line up with everything I have going on right now, so I can't do that. You eventually, like if you're a yes person that like says yes to everything, you'll quickly get into saying yes to too many things, and that is where it really starts to kind of have problems with doing a lot of stuff. Is like, if you overburden it, you tend to like let all of them fall. I don't know that I have any kind of like anything more fancier than just run it through the value filter and just kind of be honest with people. It is the biggest thing. Is like I try to be honest with people and tell them up front, like, if you text me, I could respond in a day or a year, like for real. If you need any kind of urgency, like call me. And if I see you call me, I'm going to answer, and you'll, in the moment. But like I tell people that so they don't think I'm just like leaving them on red and not responding to them. And then if I tell someone this is a flaw in my character and you judge me for that, like I'm at least okay with that at that point. You know, I should probably work on character flaws to some degree. Some of them I don't know if I care to work on. I don't know if they're really flaws. But I don't know. I just try to represent that, and it tends to solve the problems I care about. So cool, good deal. Well, I think that's all for me. So, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, good.